Hey, and welcome to the PublishPress Podcast. I'm Steve Birch, and here at PublishPress, we help publishers succeed with WordPress. But you need more than just a great WordPress site to make a successful publication. You need money as well. I've invited my friend Matt Hoy from a company called Revcontent on to talk about just that. Revcontent is a native advertising company, and they're based here in Sarasota, Florida, where PublishPress is based too. So he's a neighbor of mine, and we're in adjoining businesses too. Matt has a great 100-foot view of the publishing industry. He sees revenue and traffic across thousands and thousands of publishers, and he sees what's working for them and what's not. So I invited him on today to talk about advertising, to talk about revenue, to talk about publishing, and a little bit of soccer as well. Hey, Matt, welcome to the PublishPress Podcast.
Appreciate it, Steve-O. Thank you for having me on.
So people watching this might be a little confused. There are two British people on the podcast, both working in publishing, both living in Sarasota. And you're basically my neighbor, right?
Pretty much, yeah. We're down the road. We play football together, or one of us does anyway. And
one tries.
Yeah. And yeah, no, we're obviously friends off the field as well. It's just bizarre that our industries sort of crisscross a little bit. It's kind of cool because we're in a sort of smaller market here for ad tech, if you like, and we've definitely found some synergies in people we work with. It's cool.
Yeah, Florida is not a hotbed of tech companies, but Revcontent is based right here in Sarasota, right?
It is, yeah, it is. I mean, I think, since COVID, we've had a lot of remote workers and stuff sort of move down here, and a lot of companies. Yeah, Rumble, for example, is based on the road in Longboat Key, I believe, and there's a few others as well that are around Tampa. But certainly a lot of workers are down here remotely working, sort of moving from New York, Chicago. But we were incubated out of an affiliate network that started in Sarasota, owner founded, and then we were sold to private equity about 3.5, 4 years ago now. So it's been a cool journey. It's been one to be a good part of.
How long have you been with them? How long has your journey with Revcontent been?
It's I'm coming up on 10 years. It'll be 10 years in August. So, I started out just as a lowly sales rep and sort of worked my way through the ranks. And, I'm now the chief revenue officer. I was saying this to someone else the other day. We sort of wear many hats on the C-level. So I think it's a CRO/COO, which is probably a shared responsibility for everyone. But my function is to oversee the demand and supply teams, account management for, publisher retention, and then anything that sort of falls on the business side. Our CEO, Richard, sort of does a lot of the stuff with the board alongside me. So I'll do a lot of the business operations kind of day to day, as well as the sales and retention component.
So you work with a lot of publishers. If I came to one of your customers' websites and was looking for Revcontent, where would I be looking? What would I see? What does Revcontent do for the publishers?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, we're below the fold publisher. So, much more limited viewability. We're sort of looking to monetize that user once they get to the end of that article, as opposed to just bouncing off the page. We have some session retention tools and stuff that work down there in terms of recirculating the user as well. And also before they bounce back to Google, Facebook, wherever they've kind of, come from to the publisher's page. CPC model, it has that reputation of being clickbaity, but the industry has certainly changed an awful lot over the years. I think different companies have gone in different directions, but I like the lane that we've sort of picked and decided to sort of stay in.
So if I come to an article about great places to visit in France, for example, like top 10 cities to go on vacation in France, sure. I would scroll to the bottom, and at the bottom, there would be some Revcontent articles recommending like ways to get a cheap flight to France, or related content links at the bottom of the article, right?
Yeah, it's native content. I would say, in terms of the contextual relevance, it's probably not quite as deep as that. It's a bit more of a broader scope. If we have advertisers that go into that vertical, we're trying to verticalize as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we're a monetization engine. So typically trying to force something into a very close niche like that typically kind of depletes the revenue pretty dramatically. We have a lot of brand controls that we work hand in hand with the pub on, just to sort of make sure that the the KPIs on marketing brand guidelines are sort of being met. But essentially, in a nutshell, yeah, you'll see our ads down there, sometimes mixed in with recirculated content from the publisher, which pulls based on whatever KPI they have. And yeah, like I said, a CPC model, and it's very consistent, reliable revenue for for our customers, and we think we provide very good customer service to go along with it.
Oh, so the option is there for the publishers to insert some of their own content alongside the ads. It might be a good way to build trust. They see content from the same publisher they've just finished reading, plus also maybe an ad that they trust a little more next to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, we've done some studies to sort of look at the best sort of makeup of internal to ad ratio. And it really depends on time of year with the publisher. Sometimes they might have different events they want to publicize on their own end during Q4. So we can kind of use it as a direct sold component for their internal resources as well. During Q1, their revenue needs might be a little more pressing, if you like, with the dry up of demand elsewhere. So we can kind of increase the ad ratio again. But typically what people will see is sort of a 60-40 ratio from ads to internal content. But then a lot of our publishers will just run 100% ads because they want to capture the margin and the revenue for themselves.
Well, that's interesting because, forgive me for being quite so blunt, but some of the other companies in this space have kind of a bit of a seedy reputation. Some of the ad blocks you'll see under posts are a little scammy.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're trying to do things to build trust?
We definitely are. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and sit on my ivory tower and say, that our ads are the best in the best industry. I mean, certainly in terms of content rec, we think they're the sort of cleanest and less clickbaity ads of the lot. But at the end of the day, the goal for our ads is to make the user sort of click. So we have to entice them in some sort of capacity. That being said, the user experience that we try and portray is along their brand guidelines, blocking with keywords the same way Google will do things on their end, making sure that the ads that appear are essentially what their expectations are for the publisher. But then also the number of ads, we try and take the route of sort of getting less real estate on the page. Some of our competitors, and I'm not here to bash them, will take, a ton of real estate, a ton of pixel space. And the question I always sort of ask is, well, if you're giving up that much real estate, you're really getting paid that much more for it? And the answer typically is no. The reason for that is really buried in the need for, driving more and more profitability for a publicly traded company. And so they need more ads to sort of, get more on the page. But for me, my goal and the mandate that I've kind of pushed to the team here is to, we obviously need to make money ourselves, but at the same time, if the publisher is not making more money, then it's not beneficial to us. Like if it means more for them to run a direct campaign that we make no money from, let's go ahead and do it, because then they're happy, their KPIs are being met, and we're sort of pushing our flexible nature, which is not something that's very prevalent in the industry as it stands right now.
So what kind of publishers are running these ads? Are they generally companies that are going after large search volume? They're not niche publishers exactly. These are scale publishers who are driving traffic through Facebook and other sources.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say we've got a full spectrum of publishers. We have a huge partnership with Apple News. So we're a reseller for Apple News, which is more of a programmatic partnership. So, if you classified Apple News as a partner, even though we work directly with the publishers, that's a very big partnership for us. But then in terms of the core business offering, which is the web property, we have everything from on the larger side, sort of Hearst newspapers, trusted media brands, right down to small independent publishers on the local news front, for example, is something we do very, very well, with small newspaper groups, whilst, individually they don't generate tons of money. When you look at them cumulatively as a segment of the industry, if you like, they're very, very meaningful for us. And we're able to sort of parlay our demand into these sort of swaths of publishers as a group. Because we know the audience is going to be very, very similar in nature from publisher A to publisher B in the local news industry, for example.
And this may be just an extra source of revenue for them. These publishers may be selling their own ads. They may have subscriptions. They may have paid newsletters. And then Revcontent is jumping in and adding maybe a fourth or a fifth revenue source for these publishers.
100% you've nailed it. And like I said, I'm not here to bash competitors, but their direction now with the merger of Teads and one of our competitors, Outbrain, and then Taboola's sort of filings, is that they want to take up more and more and more and more real estate and drive essentially more revenue for themselves as opposed to the publisher. We want to take the inverse of that, be publisher friendly, paying our bills and sort of growing the revenue in a scalable manner without sort of, I don't want to use the word screwing someone over, but putting them first, if you like, rather than ourselves first. And it's interesting. I think, some of our competitors are sort of looking to take on the trade desk and go after those placements. It's an interesting strategy, and I'm not sure one that's going to be successful, but they have to grow and they have to grow aggressively, and they're sort of playing in a different field to us. We're very happy with the lane we've picked, as I said before, and we're going to keep doubling down on that because it is working for these larger pubs like a Hearst Newspapers, for example.
Are you threatened at all by by Google's constant talk of banning third-party cookies? Basically, a lot of ad networks will be pulling in data, pulling in cookies from external services to target their ads. And Google, well, one day they're banning it, one day they're not, but they keep on talking about banning the cookies that will make those ads work. How would that work for Revcontent?
Yeah, it's like the tariffs, right? Are they coming or are they not coming, right? We've been sort of playing this game now for, I want to say, best part of 2 years at this stage. It's will they, won't they? For us, it's kind of, I can make an argument either way. In our demand, we're unique first party demand only. We have the option to throw very light programmatic in. We recommend to most publishers they don't do that because we found that you actually rob Peter to pay Paul. And a lot of these advertisers will just enter at different price points, and it actually increases the value of their placements higher up the page. Whereas with our competitors, they sort of bid into the lowest point of entry, which is the low viewability of a Taboola or Outbrain feed. And you actually diminish the programmatic returns overall. So I would say for us personally, no, it's actually a benefit if the cookie goes away, the cookie does go away, because we will not be impacted, and it will sort of move towards a performance-based model, which will probably open up avenues for us. And we've seen it in the UK a little bit, with what's it called, GDPR coming in over there. If you look at a lot of UK publishers now, companies like ourselves are taking up a lot more real estate beyond the below article slot. So in theory, it opens up a lot of opportunities for us. The reason I would be hesitant to be ecstatic about it is, at the end of the day, if publishers aren't making money, we need publishers who are making money and doing well for us to be successful. And whilst it might be great that we can spin some extra money up and make some extra placements for them, if their overall yield diminishes, which I'm 99.9% sure would happen if the cookies go away, then it does impact us in some regard down the line, because if pubs go out of business, then we're all going to be struggling, right? So we need publishers to be healthy. We need them to have a diverse revenue set, and we're happy to be a small part of that and play our part to help them grow and scale.
Are you trying to adjust to the changes with Google search disappearing? Google search is sending a lot less traffic to publishers than it used to. So that may be impacting the amount of revenue, the amount of inventory you can serve on the publishers. Are you trying to adjust to that with like newsletter tools, or are there other ways you can help publishers make money?
Yes, I mean, I would say 100% we've seen that impact. Whilst we're in a fortunate spot, we've grown very nicely over the last couple of years. When we sort of analyze it on a pub by pub basis, you can kind of see the core search traffic is definitely diminishing. It's not something that keeps me up at night because I can't control it, right? It's one of those things where if it happens, it happens. We can't really do anything about it. The things that we can control are talking with publishers, understanding what their challenges are, and helping them out wherever possible. Like I mentioned, we have a strong partnership with Apple News. That's becoming a very, very strong source of impressions, obviously subsequent revenue, not just for us, but for the publishers as well. I think the user behavior now, I don't know what the statistics are on people that have iPhones, but I imagine it's fairly high in the US. And so I think a lot of user behavior now, people are just going directly to, their iPhones to consume the news. And then in terms of newsletters, we're certainly seeing a pivot towards publishers wanting to own their own audience and monetize it in whatever regard they can. be that subscriptions, be it a paywall, be it a newsletter they monetize or bring the user back to their site. I think people are just fed up with trying to rely on Google, Facebook, insert tech conglomerate name, to rely on their business to run functionally. If you look back to, I think it's 2017 when, everyone was sort of all in on Facebook, and then one day they just closed the walls overnight, and pubs lost entire businesses. We had, Dipley is the one I always think about. They had these huge offices in New York City. They're a big partner of ours. And they closed business within 3 months of Facebook shutting things down because they hadn't diversified the revenue set at all. So I think, pubs have to be able to pivot and sort of forecast the changes as they come, but also keep that level head and not freak out about it. That's the way we try and do business here. Like, I can't predict Google throwing up an AI search. If you go and search for how to make an apple pie or something, and the top, core of the page is now an AI generated response. We can't control that, right? We can see that it's hurting publishers who are in, the lifestyle vertical. We've seen that take a huge hit in the last couple of years, or last probably 6 months more so. But we can't control it. So we just have to work with these pubs, understand what's going on, and try and do our best to generate them as much money as we can, whilst also not being reactive to whatever the industry is kind of throwing around at this point in time.
Are there verticals that are getting hit worse than others? Doing what you do, you probably have a pretty good global perspective. I imagine right now political sites may be doing quite well, whereas other verticals are having a harder time.
Yeah, that's spot on. There's a lot of news traffic out there, which I would say is the majority of our network. We're definitely seeing a resurgence, in news. I think post-election, people were kind of burned out with the news cycle in general. So we saw in sort of January and early February that everyone sort of took a break from it and let the sort of dust settle in the world. And it sounds kind of sadistic, but obviously whenever there's a news cycle, positive or negative, ad tech companies benefit from that. And right now there's a lot of people online, ecstatic, angry, worried, whatever the emotion is. They're kind of manifesting that in going to publishers' websites or absorbing the news. And there's obviously an impact on that positively for publishers and obviously ad tech companies like ourselves as well. In terms of verticalization, certainly the news is doing well, but then I look at like lifestyle type sites that typically have done great in the past. And just because of the AI example that I used earlier, they're just not seeing that traffic and they're getting crushed by it. And it's really sad because historically those companies have had really great evergreen content that does really, really well, especially from an advertising perspective, because there's nothing controversial there. So they're able to kind of maximize their revenue from, people who do use cookies. It's a very clean experience and brands are happy to kind of bid on that traffic. And that's still the case, but right now they're just not getting the volume through the door through search that's typically kind of paid the bills and driven a lot of money. There's a lot of worry out there in the space right now. I can tell you from chatting to pubs, and they're all looking for the silver bullet to fix it, but I don't think there is one as of right now.
When you say lifestyle, you're talking about like travel sites, recipe sites, reviews.
Yeah, I think when you look at AI as being the main driver to sort of prevent these guys from making the money, if you Google search something that's political, AI is not going to make a judgment call on that because they don't want to be seen to be taking a stance positively or negatively and whatever that search is. But when it's something that's completely non-controversial, like you used your example of cities to visit in Paris, right? If you throw that into Google right now, I'm 90% sure you're going to get probably some kind of AI generated response as the top answer. And then below that, you'd have, your Time Out magazines and people like that would sort of follow suit below there. Whereas previously they'd have been right at the top of the tree in terms of that top Google search result. And whilst it may seem very small to have that slightly less pixel space on the page, it's massive because everyone knows, 9 out of 10 people will click the first 3 searches. And if that first segment on the page is taken up with an AI generated answer, a lot of people are going to kind of take that as gospel moving forward.
Oh, I hadn't quite tweaked it like that before, that the less controversial you are, the more likely AI is to eat your lunch.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%, because they can kind of jump on that request. there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing controversial about it, right? They, regardless of anyone's opinions on the politicians of today, they don't want to be seen to be giving an opinion on Democrat or Republican politicians. And, giving an opinion on travel to a city or how to make cake is very easy to kind of generate as AI. I also think as well, with the advent of ChatGPT, I know myself, I find the results just extremely compelling whenever I'm sort of searching for something, and I'm happy to pay, the $20 a month or whatever it is to kind of use ChatGPT. I think it's great for my personal work in terms of just bouncing things around in there and seeing what results are available. But I also think some users are sort of gravitating towards that as opposed to Google, just because of the kind of messy experience that it's become now. I do think that's a limited sort of percentage of society, but as it gets bigger and bigger, as we know that industry is going to be, I think that's the latest thing that's going to sort of drag money and dollars and eyeballs away from publishers' pages.
So if you don't mind me asking a bit more of a technical question,
We'll see. Go ahead.
How would an ad network work with newsletters and Apple News? I'll start with Apple News first. When it comes to being a partner of Apple News, are you selling directly to Apple, and then Apple will add your ads on the articles that are coming through the app, or are you working with the publishers, and the publishers are pushing their own ads through the app?
Yeah, exactly that. So we have a close working relationship with Apple, so we have to be approved as an official vendor. You can go to their website and we're listed there. Our official designation is a reseller, and it's not your traditional programmatic type integration, where you eat what you kill in there. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't, because there's a lot of manual sort of adjustments that go on in terms of looking at historical bids and performance and kind of allocating traffic in a much more manual way, either through Apple's Workbench, or you can do it through GAM as well. So we basically work with the publishers, understand what the rates are that we need to be at to kind of secure as much traffic as we can for them. And it's a good environment for us. It's a good environment for them because it is performance based. So there's no guarantee that we'll keep that traffic. But it's been great for us in terms of unlocking new partnerships, because historically, for some reason, the content rec industry has sort of pivoted towards these long, ridiculous contracts that lock people in for 2, 3, 4 years sometimes. Whereas Apple News, it's not like that, and Apple will not allow that to happen, which is a very good thing for publishers and for networks to keep them on their toes. So we've been able to kind of spin up a lot of partnerships with big people like, NPR, The Guardian, BuzzFeed, big Apple News publishers, Gannett, that we can kind of go into their system, make them some meaningful money, build a relationship with them. And then when those bigger contracts do come across for the web, we've sort of already got that, not that foot in the door, but that sort of established relationship, to hopefully then convince them that we can work on their web properties as well. So Apple's been a really good environment for us to work in, and it's been tremendous for us. They're great partners. The publishers love it as well because of the privacy relay that goes on within Apple. There's no tracking. It's very hard for a lot of advertisers to monetize that traffic because of what I talked about earlier. We don't have that issue. We don't need that to be able to, throw ads in there that can be very beneficial for the advertiser, but also for the publisher as well.
Oh, so Apple is basically looking for ad networks that are brand safe, family friendly, and they approve certain ad networks. And so if you're a publisher that wants to go through Apple News and you want to make money, you're basically looking for one of the approved advertising partners.
Yep. That's exactly it. So we're an official Apple reseller is the designation. So whilst we work closely with Apple on product updates and making sure our code is, compliant, whatever they have going on their end, and that's someone way smarter than me that deals with that, by the way. We work directly with the publishers and they integrate everything on their end via Apple's mediums. And then the revenue flows directly from us to the publisher. Like Apple's not in there taking a cut. They have some ambitions to run their own ad server at some point, or ad network at some regard. I think that's going to potentially be something down the line that we have to look at. But the feedback that we get is that They're extremely happy with what we do. They see the value we provide for their publishers. And their main goal is not to kind of make this walled garden approach, but sort of have everyone involved. But they obviously want to be able to direct sell a certain amount of ads with a low fill rate, but a high yield for them as well to improve publisher monetization on their side. But it's been a tremendous vehicle for us to work with pubs. It's been a long road. I'm sure you can imagine the Apple approval process is not straightforward. It probably took us a year and a half, 2 years to get the approval done, but we've been now approved for, I think it's about 20 months, something like that. And it's been going great, and it continues to go from strength to strength.
Okay, so if you're a publisher that is seeing a dip in your Google traffic, Apple News might be one way that you can try and boost your traffic, and also newsletters as well. Are you just giving them like a little JavaScript line of code they can drop into MailChimp or whatever their newsletter service is?
So it's HTML for email.
Okay.
So HTML tag for email. But yeah, essentially, we serve the ads a little bit differently. It's more of like a single serve panel versus a multi-panel below article type unit. So it's more of a traditional sort of banner size, but we can kind of custom create with CSS, whatever the publisher sort of needs us to do. And it's an interesting space. Like I said, I think a lot of pubs are now trying to sort of own their own audience. They're trying to get in front of that. Rates in email are a lot lower just because the click-through rates are lower, just generally speaking. That's the nature of the beast. But the sort of impression volume is definitely there from the publishers we've integrated with. We definitely see variance in terms of quality, in terms of how publishers sort of procure their email lists and how often they email blast people. And like I said, different publishers have different KPIs. Some of them are very interested in brand exposure and just kind of building their brand or bringing them back to the website. But a lot of them are just interested in a volume play and driving as much money as possible. And we don't really want to work with those guys. Whilst it'll be beneficial to us, the diminishing returns for advertisers is just not really worth it for us. So we want to work with the high quality pubs who kind of compile their email lists in a very strategic manner. They're not e-blasting someone to the same list with just nonsense. We want someone who's having a high quality newsletter. Our ads are a very small part of that. And it just kind of sits in there and helps them monetize a little bit. But it's a developing market. There's only 2 players really in it aside from us. One of them just got acquired by Zeta. And again, I'm not here to bash competitors, but we all know what Zeta is. It's a data company. So I don't think they're that interested in the monetization side of things. And the other one, was acquired recently by OpenWeb. I think they still continue to do an okay job, but I don't think they're sort of pulling up any trees either. So for us, it creates opportunity. And for the publishers, I think it's good to have a third option in a pretty consolidated market as things stand.
So Matt, a Revcontent, you can scale up. You've got Hearst Media Group, and through Apple News, you got some big publishers like Washington Post and The Guardian. But do you also scale down as well? We've had quite a few people on the podcast who are involved in local news, regional newspapers, town, city newspapers. Is that also the kind of the kind of publisher that could use Revcontent?
Yeah, no, 100%. And like we never want to sort of disrespect those smaller publishers. At the end of the day, you never know when one of these guys is suddenly become a big publisher. But I think local news in particular has been very much neglected from just the industry in general. I think they struggle. We actually partner, and we're an official, sponsor, official partner of the LMC, which is the Local Media Consortium. And they work with, big conglomerates like Town News, which is hundreds and hundreds of small, local news publishers that we're on all of them. But then they work with, very, very small independent guys as well. They're just like a one-man show who's running everything for a small newspaper in Iowa. And, like I think I said this earlier, but whilst those individually may not make a ton of money, we know what the audience is going to be like. So when you cumulatively bucket those together into our demand pool and advertise it to our advertiser audience as local news, they'll just buy it up because they know that audience is great. And it's very transferable. So regardless if you're working with a media news group that we do with like a Chicago Tribune, which is obviously a huge audience, big brand, the small guy in Iowa is essentially a very, very similar audience that we can advertise to, and just adds to that sort of impression count that we can advertise and use in our demand mix. So yeah, we love the smaller publishers. We think they're very, very important. We went through a stage of just working with smaller pubs, to be honest with you. And, we like to think now we have a really solid mix of, if you want to call them target kind of accounts that we work with and sort of blue chip publishers. But we always sort of give the white glove service to the guys that are further down the ecosystem. Because like I said, you never know when one of them's become a big pub down the line.
So Matt, we run a publishing podcast and our audience is mostly publishers. And so a lot of the questions I've been asking have been on the publishing side of things. But I'm curious about the reverse side as well. Who are the buyers for these ads? Who's coming along and saying, I want to run my ads on those publishers' websites? Who's making revenue from these?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So, I mean, we have a pretty diverse makeup. There's a lot of direct response advertisers that are in there of sort of various different sizes. We'll have affiliates that are working with us and just kind of grabbing offers from wherever they can to kind of find as much traffic as they possibly can, sell into them. But, we have a lot of guys that, are selling. We just brought a company called Nuzzle on, which is a pillow company that's doing very, very well with us, for example, and using their product to kind of leverage Apple News and the web traffic and email traffic to get their pillows out there. They take a very measurable ROI from the traffic that we give them and scale up or scale down as they see fit. If they're not getting ROI on certain widgets or certain traffic types, they can actually go in there and block them on their end. The one area that we've moved away from is the MFA space, made for advertising, which is kind of the dirty word in ad tech, which it's just a diminishing industry. It barely exists anymore. People like the Trade Desk have just kind of blackballed these websites, and rightly so, in my opinion. The model, for those that don't know, is just they'll leverage a network like Revcontent, Taboola, Outbrain, whoever, and they'll buy a click for a certain amount and try to arbitrage it back based on whatever their ad stack looks like. But typically the user experience is very spammy, very clickbaity. And it's just something that we don't really want to be associated with. So we've sort of moved away from that in terms of allowing that in our demand mix. There's a couple of advertisers that still exist out there, but they're just not a big part of our platform anymore.
Also, part of the secret sauce to make Revcontent work is to go out and find the right partners to sell the ads to. That you could be running this business in a much more spammy way. You could be taking on low quality partners, but a big part of your business is actually on the sales side too, looking for the right partners to sell the ads to.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made if you want to sort of lower your standards in terms of the advertiser mix that you want to sort of portray. And I think, to be fair, Taboola and Outbrain, I think they've been part of this as well. All three of us have sort of moved to a higher standard of user experience in terms of the ads that are shown. I think back in 2016, all three companies were just completely non-compliant with everything that goes on today. But we've all sort of moved in lockstep to sort of make the experience better. I don't think it's perfect still. We have to constantly stay on these guys, to make sure they're not rotating landing pages when they come in and get approved. Once they're in the platform, that goes through an approval process. We look at the landers. We make sure it's compliant. We verticalize it and tag it to make sure the blocks that publishers have in place don't cross hairs with the advertisers that are being sort of portrayed on their website. But we have to monitor it as well, because once it's in the platform, the offer's there, it's very easy for them to manipulate a landing page and change that and make it non-compliant again. So we have a zero tolerance policy. If we find someone doing that, they're just out of the platform and gone, because we can't risk our publisher relations, to be completely frank with you. And whilst we might make a quick buck on something that's non-compliant, we have to make sure we're looking at the long-term effect of what that will do from a compliance standpoint on our side, but also a brand safety aspect for the publishers. So we take it really, really seriously. We have a whole department that's dedicated just purely to compliance, reviewing campaigns, monitoring campaigns, looking at statistics, making sure we're not doing something shady and kind of slapping things down as we need to.
There's other publishers that you've seen recently who have really taken off. Is there like a niche or an approach, or is there anything that is working right now for publishers that you see? You've got a good global view of this. Are they focused on a particular niche, or are they on Substack, I'm just guessing, or are they using certain techniques? What are publishers doing that is working right now?
I think we go back to the diversification, right? I think that's what it comes down to, and what is key. I'm going to have to divert to my earlier answer and just say Apple News, because that's the one where we're seeing tremendous growth and tremendous, I guess, that's a new to the industry, right? I think it's something that's really come in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and it keeps on growing in terms of like users kind of using it and just seeing that as a very valid news source. I think, you've got to look at it generationally as well. I think there was a statistic recently where there was something around, users who younger than you and I, Steve-O, but, sort of in their 20s and maybe early 30s, they don't use traditional cable news anymore or traditional websites for their news. They're going to these alternative, news sources, podcasts, things along those lines. Email is a big part of it as well. I don't know if it's a trust factor or just the way the world's moved along, but they're looking at alternative ways of absorbing their content. So I think any publisher that is sort of ahead of that and diversifying into these other avenues, which, we can't probably help them with, but things like podcasts, they're going to be very successful. Obviously, there's a huge lift to be able to generate and produce, as you well know, a successful podcast. But I think, being ahead of the curve on that sort of thing and building your own audience is crucial to be able to monetize it, even for your .com traffic as well down the line. You can cross promote, you can do things, all sorts down there.
By the time this comes out, you're going to be, I think, like episode 14 or 15 for this podcast. We're quite new. But I swear in every single episode, it's not been the exact word, but the idea of multi-channel has everyone who is talking about making it work in publishing. They have a website, which is like the basic table stakes, but then they add on a newsletter, a podcast, events, that they're reaching their audience through 5, 6, 7 different methods. And it's hard work. It's like keeping on top of all that is hard work, but it's the only way to make it work right now.
It is. I mean, I think a good example I could talk about, I was good friends with the guys that used to run a big Bitcoin site back in the day when Bitcoin was booming, and they ended up leaving the business because it was acquired by someone who just wanted to sort of use it as a voice for the cryptocurrency sort of industry. They've pivoted that entire business now to be completely events based. And according to what I've heard, they're sort of tripling the revenue that they were on the website side of things. The website still exists, but it's all geared now, or it certainly was geared towards just the events and the podcasts and stuff that they were doing, and just sort of using it as a mouthpiece for the industry, which definitely parlays some easily monetizable opportunities for them.
Oh, so they've moved to like conferences or private events?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Conferences, events based. It's a model I don't know a ton about, but it seems to be working for them. Now whether they've got some crypto bro who's sort of running it and he's got so much money, he doesn't need to make money, who knows? But in theory, like looking from the outside in, it's definitely working.
Oh, okay. So even the conference perhaps maybe promoting some other kind of product. Then you have the website is promoting the podcast, which is promoting the conference, which is promoting maybe a third-party product, and these media companies are stacking what they do on top of each other to make a company with 5, 6, 7 sources of revenue.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And obviously there's an overhead that goes along with that, but we've had to do the same thing as well on our side. We've had to look and find new avenues of growth because sometimes we get boxed out of the website deals for various different reasons. And we have to look at Apple News, we have to look at email. I think international expansion is something that we'd like to sort of kick the tires with down the line. Again, there's obviously an overhead that goes along with that, so we have to kind of weigh the pros and cons with it. But a lot of revenue comes outside of the US for our main competitors, so I know there's opportunity there. So we have to look at the same things as well on our end.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Matt. We've spoken with quite a lot of publishers who have had luck finding really quite strong niches in the publishing world. For example, we have one guy on the podcast who was raving about Flipboard as an app driving a lot of traffic to his publishers. It had quite a lot of similarities with Apple News in that it's highly curated. It's not just an algorithmic feed of spam, and they were doing like food and travel blogs and getting quite a bit of traffic. And then we've come across local news sites where WhatsApp has been a good method for them to grow a local news group and they send their news out and get quite a bit of traffic that way. Are there other things that Revcontent is looking towards in terms of growth? You've got the international. You're looking around for possibly other places you could put your ads.
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to it, right? It has to sort of marry with the quality that we want to do. I think, again, not here to bash competitors, but I think their need for growth has sort of taken them into areas where we've sort of tested things like having the ads on like handsets, for example, where it sort of preloads into some sort of feed similar to Apple News, but almost it's sort of forced onto the user when the iPhone, or not the iPhone, whatever phone it is, sort of purchased. And we found that the quality there is not great, but again, the revenue opportunity is pretty huge. But we have to sort of balance that need for quality, for the advertisers and harmonize that experience as much as our own need to sort of grow revenue sort of steadily. WhatsApp's interesting. I have not heard of that. So when I get off this call, I'm actually going to take a look at that because I have not heard of that before. But certainly Flipboard and things like Newsbreak, whilst we can't really directly integrate with those two for various reasons, we've had discussions over the years. We do get that traffic in some regard. It's a little bit trickier because they do want to keep those users within their own ecosystem to monetize them, which I totally understand. But once those users do bounce onto the properties themselves, you'll find our ads are on quite a few of them once they sort of exit the Flipboard or Newsbreak, app experience. But it's definitely growing. And like I said, we talked about diversification. I think Flipboard, WhatsApp, which I'm definitely going to look at, and Newsbreak are things that we definitely want to get, in front of and be able to sort of monetize them as best as we can for these pubs.
Yeah, with WhatsApp, I'm not sure you could serve the ads directly in there, but they do drive traffic. And basically these local news sites will grow a group, just I think their community or a group on WhatsApp that they can then add thousands and thousands of people to, and people can subscribe to it. And it's another way to get updates. I think ESPN has a WhatsApp group and quite a few newspaper sites do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing we've always tried to avoid is with a spell in the industry where push notifications were like the buzz thing, and we tested that, and the quality was just not great. And again, it all comes down to what I talked about earlier in terms of how the publisher is using that medium in the manner that they want to do it, because we found that some pubs will just push notification, blast out people with just nothing but ads on the send. And they would do it 5-6 times a day, whereas some pubs would do it once a week as part of a newsletter to drive them to the website. Our ad may or may not be part of that. We just decided as a company to move away from push notifications as a medium. Whilst it could drive a lot of revenue, it just didn't harmonize that advertiser experience in a very good way for us, is what the feedback I think we received on the limited traffic we provided to them. So, it's those sort of things that whilst they create a lot of opportunity for us as a revenue driver and for the publisher, we have to kind of keep that third wheel in place and make sure the advertiser is happy. Because at the end of the day, if the advertiser isn't happy, then we're not going to make money. The publisher's not going to make money. So we have to be very careful on the traffic sources that we look at before getting too excited about. And we're British, Steve. We don't get too excited about anything, right? We have to be very careful and just make sure that it's the right fit for everybody. Because there's definitely some interesting stuff out there. It's not like, the 2014, 2015 days where it was all sorts of garbage going on, but there's still stuff out there that renders big revenue dollars, but it's just not a fit for us as a business.
So final question for you, Matt. You see hundreds, thousands of publishers a year. Is there one publisher whose work you really admire at the moment? Someone who's, when you see their newsletter in your inbox, or when you see a new post for them, that you get excited? Someone who is really doing good work as a publisher right now?
Well, I enjoyed the content this week around Coventry City playing Portsmouth, to be honest with you, with our 94th minute winner against your boys. That's why I've got the kit on for you today. But no, I mean,
it made my eyes bleed throughout the whole podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wore it for you. And I've made sure the badge has been in view the whole time for you right there. No, I mean, look, aside from sports content, which I think that's both of our passions, right? We're both very much into sports, and So anything sort of podcast related with sports, I really enjoy, like the Overlap podcast. I love the Peter Crouch podcast, but sort of moving away from those ones. I enjoy the Morning Brew stuff. I think it's solid. I think it's a very good product. I don't think they're trying to over monetize things. I think it's solid. It's a good user experience, and the content is good. Without trying to take a lane either. It stays very factual as opposed to trying to divide opinions and sort of push people a certain direction.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. It's been great to have you on, and I wish you all the best with Revcontent in 2025.
No, pleasure, mate. And same with you on your end. Hopefully this gives pubs some interesting data, and they can always hit me at matt@revcontent.com if they've got any questions that sort of spin out of that. And let's keep bringing the ad tech industry to Sarasota, right?
Yeah, there's not many big companies down in Sarasota, but Revcontent is one of the biggest and the best.
I appreciate that, mate. I appreciate it. Top man. All right, we'll talk soon.